At 4:17 that afternoon, I found my place card face down beside a wet bar towel. The Navy M in Mara Ellis had bled into the linen underneath. I had organized the Varella's private tasting from the first menu call, but the walnut table held 11 names and one bright empty space where mine had been. Celeste Ward walked in, wearing a cream suit I'd never seen before. "You're not important enough to attend," she said. Then she lifted my chair by its curved back and moved it against the wall. I was still holding the damp card when Chef Gabriel Vale came through the pantry door. He looked at my face, then at Celeste, then took the card from my hand. He dried it beneath the warming lamp and slipped it into the brass clip beside his station. That was the part I couldn't understand. Not why Gabriel kept it, why Celeste needed me to see her remove it. "The Varellas asked for the working team," I said. "They asked for leadership." "Elena's last email says," I read it. Celeste straightened the water glass at the head of the table by half an inch. She was good at that, not the glass specifically, at moving something a tiny distance and making everyone else feel careless for leaving it where it had been. The dining room at Halcyon House occupied the back corner of a former textile warehouse in Portland, Maine. The brick walls held heat badly. In January, clients ate lobster cassoulet in cashmere. In June, the old wood floors swelled enough to catch high heels. That evening, open windows let in harbor air and the metallic complaint of a delivery truck reversing somewhere below us. On the table, I had placed shallow bowls of beach roses between beeswax tapers. Nothing obstructed anyone's sightline. The bowls had been made by a ceramicist in Brunswick to echo fragments of blue china Elena Varela found during the renovation of Bellwether Inn. Celeste picked up one of the roses. "This is already browning." "It's supposed to be open." "It looks tired." "It smells stronger when it opens." She rolled the stem between two fingers, considering whether to argue with a flower. Behind us, Gabriel said, "It looks like a rose." Celeste put it back. Gabriel was 52, built like someone who had spent 30 years carrying stock pots alone, because waiting for help took longer. He had a narrow gray beard and a permanent pink burn across his right wrist. His greatest pleasure outside cooking seemed to be answering management questions with facts too plain to fight. Celeste turned to me. "You'll monitor service from the corridor. If Chef needs clarification, he can ask you there." I designed the course explanations, and I'll deliver them. "You told me this morning I was presenting courses 2 and 5. Things changed." "What things?" The kitchen printer began spitting out a test ticket. Gabriel tore it free and read it, although we all knew it said Test Table 11. Celeste lowered her voice. "The Varellas are deciding whether to give us a 3-year contract worth more than every event your unit booked last quarter. I need people at this table who project authority." I looked at the empty space. "And I don't?" "You project effort." The words landed with surgical neatness. Celeste had probably chosen them before she came downstairs. She moved toward the pantry, and I followed her. 3 months earlier, she had sat on the edge of my desk eating almonds from a paper cup and told me I had the best palate for memory she'd encountered in 15 years of hospitality. 2 weeks earlier, she'd introduced me to our partnerships director as the brain behind Bellwether. On Monday, she'd asked me to send her a clean copy of my tasting notes. By Thursday, I projected effort. "Is this about Ashford?" I asked. Her shoulders went still. Ashford Maritime's winter dinner had started 94 minutes late after Celeste cut 6 temporary servers from the staffing order. She told me the cut was necessary and promised to brief the client. She didn't. When service broke down, I stood in a loading bay with their events director and accepted the blame because Celeste was upstairs trying to keep the chairman from leaving. I thought taking the hit made me loyal. Celeste later described it in my performance review as an instance of operational overreach, followed by weak recovery. "This is about tonight," she said. "You're using Ashford to keep me out." "I'm using judgment. Yours is currently under review." She opened the pantry door. "Please check the shellfish delivery." She walked away before I could answer. The halibut was already in. The scallops weren't. Our fish supplier's driver stood by the freight elevator with an insulated crate and the expression of a man hoping not to become part of an expensive problem. "Only 6 pounds," he said. "I ordered 9. You changed it to 6 Tuesday." I changed the halibut. He gave me his phone. On the screen was an email from Celeste's assistant approving 6 pounds of diver scallops. The message referenced Purchase Revision 4, a document that did not exist in my ledger. I closed my eyes for 1 second. "How much do you have at the shop?" "Maybe 4 pounds of dry pack, but they're smaller. Can you get them here by 6:15? If Route 1 behaves." Route 1 has never behaved. That's why I said if. He almost smiled. "Bring all 4. Invoice the rush separately to my department." That would put me over the line Celeste had drawn around discretionary spending. It would also give Gabriel enough to plate the first course without changing the portion in front of the client who had specifically rejected precious little restaurant food. I signed the delivery receipt and wrote 431 beside my initials in the spiral-bound ledger I carried to every tasting. The ledger had a green cloth cover and a coffee ring from the first bellwether menu call. I used the left pages for what people said and the right pages for what those words cost. Elena Varela had said, "I want guests to feel the building remembers them." Right page, custom ceramics, $38 each at restaurant volume. Her brother Thomas had said, "Nothing should look like we're preserving it under glass." Right page, no silver domes, no tableside smoke, no historical costumes, despite Celeste suggesting all 3. Their cousin Lucia, who controlled the family's investment arm, had said, "If you tell me something is local, I will ask for the address." Right page, every primary supplier listed by town, mileage, season, and alternate. The ledger was ugly, precise, and more honest than most presentations. I checked the dining room again at 5. My chair was gone entirely. Our partnerships director, Scott Baines, had taken my place between Elena and Tomas. His card sat exactly where mine had been. Scott arrived wearing a navy jacket and carrying no notes. "Big night," he said. "Yes." "Celeste tells me you've been a machine." I wondered which version of that word she'd used. He leaned over the table. "Which one is Elena?" "Head of the table." "The silver hair?" "That's Lucia. Elena wears glasses." "Got it. And the guy?" "Tomas." "What does he do?" "He's Bellwether's brand director." "Right, creative guy. He ran operations for 12 of their restaurants." Scott's smile flickered. "So, not just creative." "No." He looked toward Celeste, who was reviewing the wine placement with the sommelier. "Anything else I should know?" "Yes. Elena hates being called Ellie. Lucia doesn't drink but wants every pairing explained. Thomas will ask whether the preservation kitchen can produce the green strawberry brine at volume. It can, but only after the second refrigeration unit is installed." Scott patted his empty breast pocket as if a pen might appear there. "You mind writing that down?" I tore a page from a server's pad, wrote it, and handed it over. He glanced at my apron. "You're not sitting?" "Apparently I'm a machine." For once, Scott didn't laugh. At 5:30, Gabriel called the service briefing. 9 cooks and 6 servers formed a loose half circle by the pass. Celeste stood on his left. I stayed near the pantry door. Gabriel went through the menu without ornament. Course 1, scallop, preserved strawberry, cucumber broth. Course 2, brown bread with smoked onion butter. Course 3, halibut, mussel cream, charred leek. Course 4, lamb, beach plum, potato. 5 is the cheese course. 6 is pear, rye, burned honey. Caramelized honey, Celeste corrected. Burned honey, Gabriel said, because we burn it. One of the line cooks coughed into her fist. Gabriel continued, "Lucia Varela does not drink. Her pairings are spruce soda, verjuice with bay, toasted barley tea, black currant shrub, salted apple water, and decaf coffee. Thomas Varela has a walnut allergy. Celeste looked up. That wasn't on the profile. It came in this afternoon, I said. When? 2:40. Why wasn't I told? I added it to the service brief and sent you the revision. You should have called. You were in a budget meeting. You still should have called. Gabriel tapped the dessert course card against the stainless counter. The pear dish uses walnut oil. Used, I said. We tested sunflower oil at 3. Gabriel approved it. Celeste turned to him. It's better, he said. That irritated her more than if we had merely fixed it. All right, she said. Any other surprises? The freight elevator bell rang. The extra scallops had arrived. I went to get them. At 6, the candles were lit. At 6:10, Celeste placed a hand between my shoulder blades and guided me toward the corridor, as if helping me through a crowded room. The Varellas arrived at 6:12. Elena entered first, brisk and unsmiling, rain silvering the shoulders of her black coat. Thomas followed with 2 bellwether executives, already asking Scott whether the exposed brick met kitchen ventilation standards. Lucia came last in a red silk blouse, carrying a small envelope of paint chips from the inn. She saw me before Celeste could block the doorway. Mara, she said. Did your potter solve the glaze problem? Yes, she changed the firing temperature. I told Elena you'd solve it. Celeste stepped in smoothly. Mara has been coordinating the production side. She'll be supporting service tonight. Lucia glanced at my apron, then at the table. I thought she was presenting. We adjusted the format to keep things at an executive level. The words hung there just long enough to become impolite. Then Elena called Lucia's name, and the group moved into the dining room. Celeste stayed behind. Do not make me correct you in front of them again, she said. You corrected Lucia. Her face changed. Not much. A slight tightening around the mouth. Make sure course 1 leaves at 6:30. It left at 6:31. From the corridor, I could see only a slice of the table through the service doors. Celeste's cream sleeve, Scott's polished shoe, Lucia's red blouse when she leaned back. I heard Celeste describe the preserved green strawberries as a little inspiration I had when I visited the property in March. Celeste had never visited Bellwether in March. I had driven there in sleet with Thomas and spent 4 hours in a kitchen stripped to studs. We found jars of green strawberries in the cellar, put up decades earlier by the inn's former owner. The seals had failed, but when Thomas opened one, the scent that escaped was sharp and grassy, like summer before it decides what it's going to become. I brought that scent back to Gabriel. Now Celeste was telling the story with better weather. At the pass, Gabriel spooned muscle cream around the halibut. Leak count? 24 charred, 6 backup. Fish temperature, 48 before fire. Wine? Sommelier switched to the Chablis after the pear cider came in sweet. He gave one short nod. This was how we had built Bellwether. Questions with measurable answers. Course 3 was ready when a server returned, carrying Elena's untouched plate from Course 2. What happened? I asked. She asked if the bread is the final recipe. It is. She said it tastes familiar. Gabriel looked over. Good familiar or funeral familiar? He asked. The server blinked. She smiled. Good familiar, I said. Gabriel set the next plate on the pass. That one was yours. The bread had started with Elena describing her grandmother's brown loaf. No recipe survived. Only details. Dense but not heavy. Almost no sweetness. Crust, soft enough to tear. I had spent a Saturday with Gabriel testing molasses percentages while Celeste attended a hotel conference in Boston. By batch 7, Gabriel had threatened to ban memory as an ingredient. I reached for the next plate. Beside Gabriel's station, my place card still stood in the brass clip. The corner had dried into a blue feather of ink. You can throw that away, I said. I can. He wiped sauce from a plate rim. He didn't. By the lamb course, Celeste's voice had taken on the warm, confident rhythm she used when she knew a room belonged to her. Even from the corridor, I could tell the Varellas were engaged. Questions overlapped. Glasses moved. Thomas laughed loudly at something Scott said. The dinner was working. That was the humiliating part. Celeste was good at her job. She could take weeks of someone else's labor and make it sound inevitable. She remembered which person needed precision, which needed charm, and which needed the comfort of being gently contradicted. If she had been clumsy, hating her would have been easy. During the cheese course, Scott pushed through the service door. Celeste needs the sourcing list. It's in the blue folder beside her. She says that's projected sourcing. The confirmed list is in my ledger. He held out his hand. I didn't give it to him. I'll answer the question. Mara. The ledger doesn't leave me. Scott glanced toward the dining room. This is not the moment to make a point. It's not a point. Lucia has questions in the margins, and the answers include supplier pricing. His hand lowered. What happened between you two? I'm beginning to wonder if something happened without me. Elena's voice carried through the open door. I understand the collaboration, she said. I'm asking who designed every course. There was a small pause. Celeste began. The menu emerged from a process I led across our creative and culinary teams. Gabriel lifted the brass clip from beside his station. My place card was still inside it. He walked through the service doors carrying the smoked pear plates, set Elena's dessert in front of her, and placed the clip in the empty space beside her water glass. The person who designed it, he said, is standing in the corridor. Then he looked directly at me. Mara, he said, bring your ledger. My legs moved before the rest of me agreed. I carried the green ledger against my apron and stepped through the service doors. The room looked different from inside it. Candlelight softened the exposed brick. The blue bowls caught thin pools of gold. 11 people turned toward me with 11 distinct versions of interest. Celeste's was the only one that felt like a warning. Gabriel set the last dessert plate in front of Lucia, then walked to the wall and pulled out the chair Celeste had moved. One of its feet scraped across the floor. Elena shifted her water glass. Sit here. There was no graceful way to add a 12th person to a table arranged for 11. Thomas moved his bread plate. Lucia gathered her paint chips. Scott dragged his chair 6 inches to the right, bumping a table leg hard enough to make the silverware jump. Ordinary, awkward accommodations. They felt more generous than anything that had happened all day. I sat beside Elena. My damp place card stood between us in Gabriel's brass clip, the navy ink blurred at one corner. Elena pointed her spoon at the smoked pear in front of her. Who designed this course? I did, with Chef Vale. Why pear? Bellwether's original dining room had pearwood panels. Most were removed in the 70s, but your restoration team found 2 sections behind the bar. Thomas leaned forward. The wood panels inspired dessert? The panels inspired the smoke. The fruit came from Lucia. Lucia stopped cutting into her pear. I turned to her. On our second call, you said your family always arrived at Bellwether after dark because your father hated losing a workday to travel. You remembered smelling the orchard before you could see the inn. She looked down at the plate. That orchard is gone, she said. The original one is. A farm in Warren still grows the same pear variety. They're supplying the fruit. Lucia tasted the pear again, more slowly. Celeste smiled as if this proved her point about collaboration. What Mara does beautifully is gather these emotional fragments. My role is to shape them into a unified guest experience. Elena looked at me. Who decided to burn the honey? Gabriel. From the service door, he said, she argued with me for 2 days. You wanted caramelized, I said. I wanted edible. Thomas laughed. Gabriel went back into the kitchen. The tension loosened just enough for me to breathe. Elena touched the blue bowl. And these? The shape came from a china fragment your contractor found under the east veranda. The first test glaze looked too clean. Lucia said the restoration shouldn't erase every mark of use, so the ceramicist added iron oxide and lowered the firing temperature. Lucia raised her eyebrows. That's the problem I asked you about when we came in. Yes. And you solved it today? The final batch came out this morning. Celeste folded her hands, which demonstrates how many moving pieces require senior oversight. Mara has been very persistent with our vendors. Persistent could mean devoted at dinner and difficult by breakfast. I opened the ledger. Elena's gaze dropped to the pages. Is that the sourcing book? It's my working record. Lucia said you had addresses. I have mileage, seasons, alternates, and confirmed volumes. Lucia pushed her wineglass aside. The sommelier had poured nothing into it, but the empty stem still occupied space in front of her. The strawberry, she said. Where does it come from at scale? Cape Elizabeth until mid-July. After that, the flavor changes too much, so we switch the first course to fermented gooseberry from a farm outside Newcastle. Celeste said, we may preserve enough strawberries to maintain consistency. We priced that, I said. Bellwether's current cold storage can't hold the required volume alongside normal hotel inventory. Thomas nodded. Until the second refrigeration unit goes in. Right. Scott looked at the note I had written for him as if surprised it had become real. Elena held out her hand. May I? I hesitated before passing her the ledger. It contained numbers Celeste considered internal, unpolished observations from the Varela calls, and a small drawing of a sheep Gabriel had made when I kept confusing two Maine cheese producers. But refusing would have made the book look like a weapon instead of what it was. Elena read in silence. She stopped at the right-hand page for the bread. 7 lines of molasses percentages crossed out. Oven temperatures. Hydration. A final note in Gabriel's block handwriting. Batch 7. Stop touching it. Her mouth moved at one corner. You made 7 versions? 8. Batch 0 was terrible. Why? You remembered a loaf that was dense but not heavy, barely sweet with a soft crust. Those qualities fight each other. She kept saying the third one was close. Gabriel called from the kitchen. It was close. It was a brick. Elena turned another page. And the 5 cuts on top? I looked at her hands. On our first call, she had said her grandmother scored every loaf with 5 lines, 1 for each person expected at supper. She mentioned it once, then immediately changed the subject to labor costs. It had felt too private to put in the presentation. For the 5 people your grandmother usually cooked for, I said. Elena's expression didn't break. It settled. Celeste reached for her water. Thomas was the one who spoke. You remembered that? It affected the design. Elena closed the ledger, keeping one finger between the pages. Then why were you in the corridor? The room became so still that I could hear the low rush of the hood vents in the kitchen. Celeste answered first. Our service model puts the creative lead at the table and the production lead near execution. Mara is exceptionally close to the operational details. That wasn't what I asked. Scott examined his dessert. I could have told the room everything. The wet bar towel, the chair against the wall. You're not important enough to attend. The sentence was sitting behind my teeth, hot and ready. Instead, I said, Celeste changed the seating plan this afternoon. Elena looked at the card in the brass clip. And Chef Vale changed it back? Chef Vale values accurate attribution, I said. From the kitchen came the clatter of a sheet pan hitting a rack. Lucia smiled into her coffee. Celeste's face remained composed. I knew how much effort that took because I had watched her practice composure on harder clients than these. Mara was scheduled to support service, she said. Clearly, her presence here is useful. We can adjust. That was Celeste's gift. If she couldn't control what happened, she could make it sound like her decision to permit it. Elena handed my ledger back. I want Mara at the implementation meeting on Tuesday. She'll be there, Celeste said. It sounded like a promise. It also sounded like a threat. The Varellas stayed another 40 minutes. Thomas questioned Gabriel about whether Bellwether's breakfast cooks could produce the brown bread without a dedicated baker. Lucia asked me to send glaze samples to the inn under 3 different kinds of light. Elena wanted a revised winter sourcing plan and actual labor minutes for each course. Scott stopped trying to answer questions he hadn't prepared for and began taking notes. That improved him considerably. When the Varellas finally stood to leave, Elena shook Celeste's hand first. "Excellent dinner." "Thank you," Celeste said. "We're excited by what we've created." Elena then turned to Gabriel. "The bread was right." "I'll tell Mara," he said. "I'm telling both of you." At the door, Lucia touched the edge of my ledger. "Send me the potter's address. I want to visit her studio." "I will." Celeste waited until the freight elevator doors closed behind the Varellas. Then she turned to the staff. "Thank you, everyone. Strong service. Chef, could you give us the room?" Gabriel leaned against the service door. "I could." "Please." He looked at me. I gave him a small nod. I didn't want Celeste accusing me of hiding behind him, even if part of me wanted 6 feet of irritated chef between us. Gabriel removed his brass clip from the table, but left my card standing beside my water glass. The kitchen doors swung shut behind him. Scott remained by his chair. Celeste looked at him. "Us as well." "I'm partnerships. This is my account." "It's an internal personnel matter." It became an account matter when Elena requested Mara in the meeting. Celeste let out a careful breath. "Fine." She walked to the head of the table and began extinguishing candles with the small brass snuffer. One by one, the room lost its flattering light. "You undermined me in front of a prospective client," she said. I answered questions. "You contradicted the sourcing strategy. There was no approved strategy to preserve enough strawberries for the full season. You could have said we were evaluating options. We evaluated it. It doesn't work." She put out another candle. "You authorized a rush purchase after I reduced the scallop order." My fingers tightened around the ledger. "Your assistant reduced it using a revision number that doesn't exist. I told her to lower the quantity. Why? Because your first course food cost was 19% over target. We discussed that yesterday. The portion size was part of what the Varellas were evaluating. And they would never have known if you had adjusted. Gabriel would have known. Gabriel is not the client. No, he's the person expected to serve what we promised." Scott shifted near the window. "Was there enough product?" "Because I ordered 4 more pounds." Celeste nodded once. "Without approval. I used my department discretion. You exceeded it by $280. Thank you for documenting that." The room seemed colder with every candle she put out. I picked up my place card. The paper had gone stiff where it dried. "You removed me before the guests arrived," I said. "You put my card beside a wet towel. Don't turn this into scallops." Her eyes went to the card. For the first time all evening, something unplanned crossed her face. Not guilt, annoyance that the object still existed. "You were never guaranteed a seat." "I had a seat at lunch." "I revised the room." "You told me I wasn't important enough to attend." Scott looked up. Celeste's gaze sharpened. "I told you this account required senior representation." "That isn't what you said." "Are we litigating phrasing now?" "We're being accurate." She set the candle snuffer down. "Accuracy is not the only professional virtue, Mara. Judgment matters. Timing matters. Understanding when your need for credit threatens a larger outcome matters." My need for credit? You could have answered Elena's question from the corridor. Instead, you sat down and opened an internal cost ledger at the table. Chef called me in, and you were delighted to go. That hurt because it was true. For 10 minutes, with Elena reading my notes and Thomas asking me questions, I had felt the ugly, relieving pleasure of watching Celeste lose control of a story she had stolen. I had enjoyed it. "I didn't ask Gabriel to do that," I said, "but you benefited." Scott spoke carefully. "So did we. Elena got the answers she wanted." Celeste turned on him. "You were invited to observe the client dynamic." I observed it. His voice stayed light, but he no longer looked embarrassed to be in the room. Celeste picked up her folder. "Send me a scan of the complete ledger by 9 tomorrow morning." No. The word came out before fear could edit it. She stopped. "I'll send relevant project pages," I said. "The ledger also contains other clients' information and private vendor pricing. It was created during paid working hours. It's an operational notebook covering 18 months. Then leave it with me and I'll determine what's relevant." I tucked it under my arm. "I'll scan the bellwether pages." Celeste stared at me long enough that I could feel my heartbeat in my jaw. "Tuesday's implementation meeting is under review," she said. "Until I've assessed tonight's protocol breaches, you are not to contact the Varellas directly. Elena asked me for materials. Send them through me. She requested me in the meeting, and I said we would adjust." Scott rubbed a hand over his mouth. Celeste gathered her presentation copies into one exact stack. "Go home, Mara. I need to close the vendor invoices. Tomorrow. The fish supplier's rush charge needs to be coded tonight." I said go home. I slid the ledger into my bag. The damp place card went into the inside pocket. In the kitchen, the staff had begun breakdown. Someone sprayed the pass. Pans knocked together in the dish station. The ordinary noise made the dining room feel even emptier. Gabriel was scraping burned honey from a saucepan. "How bad?" he asked when I came through. "She wants my ledger. Did you give it to her?" "No." "Good. She may write me up for the scallops." "You bought what I needed." "She says I exceeded my discretion." "Did you?" "By $280. He considered this while dragging a metal bench scraper across the pan. "Then she has $280. You're a comforting person. I've been told." I took off my apron and folded it on the prep counter. "Why did you keep the card?" Gabriel stopped scraping. For once, he didn't answer with a fact. "Because I watched you put those names on the table," he said, "and I wanted to see who thought they could remove yours." My calendar notification sounded inside my bag. The bellwether implementation meeting had been canceled. A second notification arrived before I could close the first. Celeste had scheduled me for an 8:30 meeting with her, Scott, and Human Resources. Gabriel looked at the screen. $280? he asked. "No," I said. I touched the stiff edge of the card through my pocket. "This is going to cost more than that." The conference room smelled like dry erase marker and burnt coffee. Dana Coe from Human Resources sat at the end of the table with a yellow legal pad and a paper cup she never touched. Scott had taken the chair nearest the door. Celeste sat across from me with a printed packet clipped at the upper left. My packet was waiting face down. "Before we begin," Dana said, "this is a fact-finding conversation, not a disciplinary determination." Celeste pushed the packet toward me. The first page was titled, "Summary of Protocol Concerns." I read the bullets in order. Unauthorized supplier purchase, disclosure of internal pricing structures, refusal to surrender company documentation, disruption of established client-facing roles, failure to follow direct instruction. The place card wasn't mentioned. "Is this complete?" I asked. "It's a starting point," Dana said. "Then I'd like the seating change added." Celeste crossed one ankle over the other. "Seating assignments are a management function, not the change. What you said when you made it." Dana's pen hovered. "What was said?" Celeste looked at me. I repeated it exactly. Dana wrote something down. Celeste waited until the pen stopped. "The statement is being removed from context. Mara was pressing to attend after I explained that the client table required senior representation. I told her she wasn't senior enough to take one of the available seats. That's different." "It's the same meaning." "No, it's the version you wish you'd said." Scott stared at the fire evacuation map on the wall. Dana folded her hands. "Let's stay with verifiable actions." I opened my bag and placed the green ledger on the table. Celeste's attention fixed on it. "I scanned the bellwether pages," I said. "The file is in your inbox, Dana's inbox, and the project archive. I redacted unrelated client information." You were instructed to provide the complete book, Celeste said. You asked. I declined. It's company property. It's a mixed-use working notebook. You have the pages related to Bellwether. Dana looked at Celeste. Did you receive those pages? At 8:54, nearly an hour late. You asked for them by 9. I expected time to review them before this meeting. I turned to Dana. The scans include the scallop order, the original approved volume, the assistance reduction, and my purchase authority. Dana pulled up a document on her laptop. Celeste tapped the packet. The amount exceeded that authority. By $280, Scott said. Everyone looked at him. He shrugged once. We should use numbers if this is fact-finding. Celeste's voice cooled. The amount doesn't determine whether the policy was violated. It might determine whether suspension is proportional, he said. Dana made another note. Celeste opened her copy of the ledger scans. These pages are exactly why I'm concerned. There are personal comments from the client alongside sensitive margin information. The comments are menu requirements. You wrote, Elena rejects spectacle when she senses someone selling around a weak operation. Scott made a quiet sound that could have been a cough. I remembered writing it after our third call. Elena had shut down Celeste's table-side smoking cloche proposal in under 30 seconds. It affected the presentation strategy, I said. It's an inappropriate characterization. Was it inaccurate? Dana stepped in. The issue isn't whether the observation was accurate. We need to determine whether storing client impressions this way created risk. The client asked to see the book, I said, because you brought it to the table. Because she asked where the sourcing record was. Celeste turned to Dana. This is the pattern. Mara treats proximity to detail as authority. At Ashford, she made client commitments without clearing them. Last night, she did it again. There it was. I felt the loading bay before I saw it. Cold air coming through the half-open door. Trays of untouched food stacked on speed racks. The Ashford events director asking where his servers were. I didn't make the staffing cut at Ashford, I said. Celeste didn't blink. No one said you did. You reduced the order from 14 temporary servers to 8, based on the revised guest count. The count went back up 3 days before the event. I sent you the update. And you failed to build a contingency after receiving no response. Scott stopped looking at the wall. I heard myself ask, "You're saying my mistake was believing you?" Dana leaned forward. Mara. No, I want that in the notes. Celeste told me she would brief the client. I accepted blame in the loading bay because contradicting my manager during service would have made the situation worse. Celeste's eyes narrowed slightly. I continued. She used that silence in my performance review. Now she's using the review to justify removing me from a project I built. That's a serious allegation, Dana said. It's a serious pattern. Celeste closed the packet. What outcome do you want, Mara? The question sounded reasonable. That made it dangerous. I want the protocol concerns assessed with the full project record. I want the Bellwether meeting restored to my calendar. And I want my role and authorship stated accurately to the client. You want an apology. I didn't ask for one. You want a public correction. I want the truth to stop changing depending on who's in the room. Dana's paper cup crackled under her fingers. Celeste looked tired suddenly, not defeated, tired. The cream suit had been replaced by charcoal and a small thread hung loose near one cuff. You think I removed you because I wanted your credit, she said. You took it. I was trying to win the account. So was I. No, you were trying to make the dinner perfect. That is not the same job. The answer was sharp enough to be honest. She leaned toward me. Halcyon's hospitality division missed target 2 quarters in a row. Bellwether is the account that keeps leadership from folding our team into general events. I have one chance to prove I can manage a national hotel client. The Varellas had already raised concerns about junior personnel controlling too much institutional knowledge. Who told them I was junior? That isn't the point. It's exactly the point. You had one failed event in your formal review and no direct reports. I could not put you forward as the face of implementation. So you put Scott at the table without briefing him. Scott's chair creaked. Celeste glanced at him. Scott represented the appropriate level. He asked me what Thomas did 5 minutes before dinner. Dana pinched the bridge of her nose. Scott said, "That is accurate." Celeste's face hardened. "Thank you, Scott. I'm doing numbers and facts today." For a second, I almost liked him. Dana called a break. I carried my ledger into the hallway. Gabriel was standing by the copier holding a tray inventory, although his kitchen was 2 floors down. "You waiting for toner?" I asked. "I like the light up here." Celeste says I endangered the account by knowing too much. She's known you know too much for months. Helpful. You keep confusing helpful with comforting. I leaned against the wall. "If Dana interviews you, will you tell her Celeste cut me from the table?" "Yes." "And that I designed the menu?" "Yes." "And that the rush order was necessary?" "I'll tell her I requested 9 pounds and received 6. Could you possibly use a sentence that implies I'm not unstable?" "No." I laughed despite myself. Gabriel lowered the inventory sheet. "I'll confirm what I saw. I won't fight this for you." "I didn't ask you to." "You were about to." The laugh disappeared. He was right. Part of me wanted him to march into the conference room with 30 years of kitchen authority and explain me to people determined not to understand. "What am I supposed to do?" I asked. "Decide what you won't agree to." That sounds like something printed on a mug. It probably is. He went back downstairs. When the meeting resumed, Celeste slid a single sheet across the table. The offer preserved my salary and benefits. My title would change from culinary experience producer to senior banquet coordinator. I would manage recurring corporate dinners, awards receptions, and seasonal fundraising events. No creative development, no direct contact with Bellwether. Operational stability, Celeste called it. I called it a room with no windows. "You don't need an answer now," Dana said. "How long?" "End of day." Celeste gathered her papers. "Until then, you're suspended from client contact. You may reconcile active vendor files under Dana's supervision." My access to the Bellwether calendar disappeared before I returned to my desk. The vendors were already feeling the pressure. Nora Venn, the ceramicist, had submitted 3 glaze tests and 2 emergency firings. Halcyon had paid only the original prototype fee. Danner Fish had never received approval for 2 previous rush deliveries Celeste requested verbally during menu development. Both timelines supported my account. Both vendors had invoices sitting in dispute. I called neither. Under Dana's supervision, I sent formal reconciliation requests through procurement, attached the ledger pages showing each change, and accepted the overruns against my department's quarterly budget. Dana read the total. "This will put your unit 12% over." "I know. If you accept the transfer, it follows you." "I know." Nora replied with dates, photographs, firing logs, and a short statement that all revisions had been requested by me after approval from Celeste Ward. Danner Fish sent delivery receipts and Celeste's emails asking that rush charges be held for final reconciliation. Skill, records, and unpaid bills, nothing dramatic, just people becoming more willing to remember accurately once accuracy included paying them. At 4:30, Dana asked for my decision. I put the transfer offer on her desk. "I won't take it." Her expression softened by a degree. "Then you remain in your current role while we review possible discipline." With no clients and no Bellwether. For now. How long is now? I can't promise a timeline. Celeste could. At 5:16, she sent a project-wide email announcing that Bellwether implementation would proceed under her sole creative leadership, with Scott managing the commercial relationship. At 5:22, Elena Varela replied to everyone, Please pause all implementation activity. We need clarity on authorship, operating authority, and vendor obligations before proceeding. Celeste's next email went only to me. Do not respond. I didn't. For 3 days, I sat at my desk reconciling other people's invoices while meetings happened behind closed doors. Scott stopped by once to return the pen he had borrowed at the tasting. It wasn't my pen. Celeste is proposing a validation dinner, he said quietly. Same menu, smaller group. She wants to prove the work belongs to Halcyon. It does belong to Halcyon. That's not what she means. Are you warning me? I'm trying to avoid another dinner where I learn everyone's job 5 minutes before they arrive. He set the pen down. She copied your production files yesterday. She has access. She doesn't have your winter sourcing model. It's in the ledger pages. The totals are, not the assumptions. I looked at him. Why are you telling me this? He glanced toward Celeste's office. Because she thinks the account can be saved if she demonstrates you were replaceable, and because I sat in your chair. Then he walked away. The validation dinner invitation arrived the next morning. Celeste, Scott, Gabriel, and 2 members of Halcyon leadership were listed. I wasn't. An hour later, Dana called me back into the conference room and informed me that my suspension from client contact would continue indefinitely. I placed my resignation on the table. My hand shook once after I let go. By the time I reached the elevator, my salary, my benefits, and the job I had spent 6 years building belonged to the floor above me. Outside, harbor wind ripped one of the buttons from my coat. I watched it roll beneath a parked delivery van and didn't have the energy to chase it. My phone showed one new email. It was from Elena. Attached was a 1-page consulting agreement for the validation dinner. The final line read, "Bellwether requires the person who can tell us whether the menu in front of us is the one we agreed to buy." I read the agreement twice on the sidewalk. The fee covered 1 day of preparation, the dinner, and a written assessment. It was respectable, not rescuing. It would pay 1 month of health insurance after taxes and leave enough for groceries if I stopped buying coffee from places that described milk by region. I signed on my phone before fear could turn unemployment into obedience. Then I went back for the button under the van. The validation dinner was scheduled for 5 days later in the same dining room. This time, when I arrived, I wore a dark green jacket instead of an apron. My ledger was in my bag. The damaged place card marked the page containing Bellwether's original service assumptions. Dana met me by the elevator. "You'll be seated with the client," she said. "Did Celeste agree to that?" The client specified it. That wasn't my question. Dana's mouth tightened. "Celeste has agreed to the format. In the dining room, only 8 places had been set. Elena, Thomas, and Lucia would sit on one side. Halcyon's operations president, Ruth Palmer, would sit across from them with Celeste and Scott. My card was beside Elena's. It was a new card. Thick ivory paper, crisp navy lettering. No blurred corner. Celeste stood by the window reviewing the menu with Ruth. She saw me, finished her sentence, and walked over. "I assume Elena sent you the confidentiality terms." "Yes. You're here to evaluate consistency, not to renegotiate the account at the table. I'm here to answer the questions in my agreement," which I haven't seen. "That would be between you and your prospective client." Her eyes moved to my bag. "Did you bring company materials?" I brought my working ledger. "You no longer work for the company. That's why I'm not required to surrender it." Scott appeared between us with 3 bottles of sparkling water in his arms. "Great," he said. "Everyone's using complete sentences." Celeste took 1 bottle from him. "Put those on the table." He waited until she walked away. "She changed the opening course," he said. "How?" "Smaller scallop portion. Different cucumber broth." "Why?" "Margin." "Did Gabriel approve it?" Scott gave me a look. In the kitchen, Gabriel was trimming lamb loins while 2 cooks portioned pear halves. He glanced at my jacket. "You look expensive." "I'm wearing a shirt you've seen 12 times. Not with unemployment." I set my bag on a dry corner of the prep counter. Scott says the first course changed. Scott has learned to arrive briefed. Did you approve it? I said it would taste good. That isn't an answer. It's the answer Celeste asked for. He slid a tray of lamb into the low oven. The kitchen was quieter than it had been for the first tasting. Celeste had reduced the brigade from 9 cooks to 6 to demonstrate that the menu could scale down to Bellwether's projected staffing level. But Halcyon still had 2 dishwashers, a pastry station, 3 reach-in refrigerators, a walk-in cooler, and separate ovens for bread and meat. Bellwether's renovated kitchen would have 1 combi oven, 1 convection oven, and a preservation room across the service hall. "How are you firing bread and lamb at Bellwether?" I asked. Gabriel pointed to a production sheet clipped above the pass. "According to this, bread finishes at 4. Lamb goes in at 5:30. Bellwether serves afternoon tea until 4:30. I cook food. I don't bend time. Did you raise it?" I wrote it in the margin. In his block handwriting beside the bread schedule, he had written, "Oven occupied by tea service until 4:45. Celeste's initials appeared beneath it. She had seen the conflict. She had chosen to serve the schedule anyway. "You're letting her fail," I said. Gabriel's knife stopped. "No, I'm letting her present her plan. You know it doesn't transfer, so do you." He looked at me over the prep table. "I told you I wouldn't fight this for you." "I'm not asking you to. You came into my kitchen and asked why I wasn't stopping her." I opened my mouth, then closed it. He picked up the knife again. "You still want someone else to make the ugly part unnecessary," he said. A cook passed between us, carrying a hotel pan of pears. I lowered my voice. "You made the place card very public, because the answer was public. And this answer is yours." He returned to the lamb. I went back to the dining room with the ledger under my arm. The dinner began without ceremony. Elena asked Celeste to explain what had changed since the first tasting. Celeste didn't pretend nothing had. We simplified 3 points of execution, reduced first-course food cost by 14%, and built the labor model around Bellwether's projected kitchen team, she said. The intention is to demonstrate that the concept belongs to a repeatable Halcyon process, not to any single employee. There it was, cleanly stated. Ruth Palmer watched Elena rather than Celeste. She had the disciplined stillness of an executive who knew reacting too early lowered the price of everyone else's information. The first course arrived. 1 scallop sat in the center of each bowl instead of 3. The preserved strawberry had become a thin relish. The broth was thicker and greener, designed to occupy more visual space. It tasted excellent. Thomas finished his and set down the spoon. "This is different." "A scalable refinement," Celeste said. "It feels like a restaurant tasting course now. We reduced richness so the full menu remains balanced." "You reduced the scallops," Lucia said. Celeste smiled. "Also true." Elena looked at me. "Does this meet the portion standard from our development calls?" "No." Celeste's water glass stopped halfway to her mouth. "The standard was that the opening course should feel generous enough to establish trust," I said. 3 scallops put it above the target food cost. We left it unresolved pending your decision." "So this isn't a tested solution," Elena said. "It's tested as food, not as the guest promise you approved." Celeste set down her glass. "That distinction is subjective." "Yes," I said. "That's why the client decides." The brown bread arrived warm, scored 5 times. Elena tore it open with both hands. It was batch 7. Gabriel had refused to alter it. She tasted it and gave no reaction beyond taking a second piece. The halibut followed, then the lamb. Every plate was skillful. Celeste presented with the same ease she had shown the first night, but she no longer borrowed my stories. She talked about yield, cross-training, and service standards. She knew the margin on every course. She had memorized the supplier towns. She had worked hard in 5 days. That made what came next harder, not easier. During the cheese course, Elena asked for my assessment. I opened the ledger. "The menu can be reproduced here," I said. It cannot be transferred to Bellwether under the current operating plan. Ruth spoke for the first time. Why? The production schedule uses this kitchen's equipment, not Bellwether's. The bread and lamb overlap with tea service in the only oven that can maintain their programmed humidity. The preservation room is across the service hall, but the labor model gives no one time to make that trip during pickup. The projected winter menu claims 80% local primary ingredients, while the approved budget assumes commodity pricing for 11 items. Lucia looked at Celeste. Including what? Scallops, pears, butter, 2 cheeses, and the grain for the bread. Celeste opened the blue folder beside her. We have alternate bids pending. From local producers? From suppliers able to meet volume. So no, Lucia said. Celeste kept her tone even. Local sourcing has always been an aspiration balanced against commercial reality. Lucia looked at me. I turned the ledger so she could see the right-hand page from our first call. Local primary ingredients. Commitment, not marketing language. Celeste's initials were beside it. Ruth leaned forward. What else? Tomas's dessert is safe tonight because Gabriel's team used dedicated tools and a separate sanitation cycle. Bellwether's equipment list doesn't include a second immersion blender, and the closing schedule gives the pastry cook 11 minutes between walnut prep for the standard banquet menu and this pear course. Tomas looked toward the kitchen. Was I at risk tonight? No. Would I be at risk at Bellwether? If staff followed this schedule exactly, there would be an avoidable cross-contact risk. Celeste flipped through her papers. That can be corrected with an equipment purchase? It can. How much? Ruth asked. $600 for tools. More important, 22 additional labor minutes and a locked storage bin. Celeste found the page and wrote the numbers down. She didn't argue. That surprised me more than any defense would have. The pair arrived in the blue bowls. Lucia took one bite, then rested her spoon across the rim. The food is very good, she said. Gabriel, standing near the service doors, dipped his head. Elena closed her menu. Chef, could your team serve this at Bellwether next month? Not with the schedule you were shown. Could any competent team? Not consistently. Celeste looked at him. He met her eyes. Your cooks performed well tonight, Elena said. They did. Who wrote the schedule? Celeste's team produced it. I marked kitchen conflicts. And they were left in? Yes. He didn't add anything he didn't need to. Elena asked the servers to clear dessert. When they left, she placed both hands on the table. Bellwether is not buying 6 attractive plates. We are buying a system that lets our own people serve those plates after everyone in this room goes home. Ruth nodded. Understood. We have paused construction decisions waiting for this menu. We now have vendors owed money, sourcing promises that don't match the budget, and a project lead whose authorship was concealed from us. Celeste's jaw tightened. Mara was employed by Halcyon when the work was created. The work is Halcyon's. I'm not disputing ownership, Elena said. I'm questioning control. Ruth looked at me. What would it take to make the plan transferable? The room waited. This was the moment I had imagined in several ugly versions. In some, I exposed Celeste until she had nothing left. In others, Ruth offered me a grand title, and everyone finally understood what I had been worth. The actual room contained cooling pears, unpaid ceramic invoices, and a loose thread on Celeste's cuff. I took out one sheet of paper. 3 things, I said. Confirm the menu's development record and authorship so the people making future decisions know where the assumptions came from. Settle the vendor revisions as project costs, including Nora Ven's firings and Danner Fish's rush charges, and appoint a lead with written authority over implementation, supplier substitutions, and kitchen validation. Celeste's eyes stayed on me. You, Ruth said. I can do it under a fixed-term contract, jointly accountable to Bellwether and Halcyon. And if we decline, Ruth asked, Elena rebids the work, Bellwether loses time, Halcyon loses the account, I lose the contract, everyone pays for it. Scott exhaled softly. Ruth asked for the room. Gabriel returned 20 minutes later with coffee. He placed a cup in front of me and took the empty chair by the service doors. "You were concise," he said. "I had more." "I know." "What do you think they'll do?" "Whatever costs less." Inside my ledger, the damaged card had slipped sideways. Gabriel pulled it free. "You kept it," he said. "So did you." "For one dinner." That was the important one. He studied the blurred ink, then handed it back. Ruth called us in after 43 minutes. Halcyon would issue a written project record naming me as culinary experience designer and Gabriel as executive chef. The disputed vendor invoices would be paid. I would receive a 6-month creative operations contract funded jointly by Halcyon and Bellwether with authority defined in an attached schedule. Celeste would remain at Halcyon as director of hospitality accounts. Bellwether would report to Ruth during implementation. Celeste would manage the recurring accounts I had refused to inherit. She read that part without looking at me. Then she negotiated. She challenged my contract rate, narrowed my authority over brand language, and insisted that supplier substitutions above a fixed threshold required joint approval. I pushed back on the termination clause and won final authority over food safety changes. Elena added weekly cost reporting. Lucia required documented local source exceptions. Tomas wanted the second immersion blender purchased before the first staff training. It took 3 hours. When we finished, Celeste and I were alone by the elevator. "You think the card was where I lost this?" she said. "No. I lost it when I let you keep the ledger. You never let me." The elevator arrived. She gave a short, exhausted laugh. "You're better at this now." "At what?" "Understanding that the work isn't enough." I thought of Ashford, the loading bay, and every silence I had mistaken for loyalty. "No," I said, "it isn't." The doors closed between us. Bellwether's reopening dinner filled the restored dining room with beeswax light and the smell of warm brown bread. The pear wood panels glowed behind the bar. Nora's blue bowls sat at every place, each one marked differently by iron in the glaze. The first course went out with 3 scallops. I found my seat beside Elena. In front of my plate stood the old card, its blurred corner held upright in Gabriel's brass clip. He adjusted it with one thick finger. "Accurate?" he asked. I looked around the table, then back at my name. "Accurate." Gabriel went to call the first course, and I took my place.